working with actors. The main reason why I like to talk about that is because I am both. I'm an actress and I'm also a filmmaker. I started working as an actress when I was 8 years old, and I started the journey as a filmmaker in 2010. So I have been on both sides of the fence for quite some years. And I have learned over the years to get a better understanding of each side, so what each side needs. And today we're going to look at how it is to work with actors from the director's point of view, what you have to think about, and so forth. Here's exactly what I will cover today. So first thing is to understand how actors work and what they need to strive. Then I'm going to look at how you can develop your director's toolbox for working with actors, something that will help you in your communication as well with your actors. Then I will also look into planning and executing rehearsals to prepare for filming, because I think this is quite an important part of the work with the actors, but it also prepares you for the filming and the whole filming process and the work on set. And I have chosen that basically as an example for that work. And then we're going to look into the rehearsal process. Of course, I can not go into the depth I would like to go today, because there's simply not enough time for that, but I will try to give you as much information as possible on the way. First, let's look at understanding actors. Actors are sometimes known as difficult, sometimes known as being divas and so forth. Is this really the truth, and what is behind that? First of all, I think what you need to know about actors is that they are the most vulnerable people while they are acting, because they are really opening up their emotional body to the work, and that makes them vulnerable but also sensitive, and that can sometimes lead to difficult situation if they are misunderstood. I think, of course, there are divas out there, but there are different type of people, I would say, and I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the average actor and what they are doing and what is expected from them. I think what will help you the most if you're a director or a director in the making is to learn and experience different acting methods by attending classes regularly, if possible. You should never really stop learning anyway, and if you can do a class every year, probably a workshop every year, that will build your skill set, but it will also build your understanding for what actors actually have to do in order to play a role. Then the second thing is that something I believe very strongly in is good communication, and that starts for me by talking with actors about their approach, asking a lot of questions, asking about their experience, where they feel that they need more guidance, because they have that knowledge about themselves, and that is a really good starting point for your working relationship, both in the rehearsal process and on set. But for me, it starts actually already in the casting process. This is the first time you might meet those actors, and they give you some kind of performance, and then you pick it up and will work with them to see whether they are the right person for the part, but also for the team and what you want to achieve with this film. Then by that, and also by developing your own skill set, that will help you to learn about them, what will quickly help them jump into the scene if they are not able at some point. Experienced actors usually don't have that problem at all. But everybody can blank at some point. A scene can be very, very difficult, and then it's great if you have something in your toolbox that will help them and that will also give them confidence and build the trust between you. There is a difference between theater and screen acting, and when you cast your actors, this has to be taken into consideration, and also in the work with the actors. Because theater acting is, a lot of the training builds on building your voice, training your voice, knowing how to project in a way that you as an actor reach the very last person in the last row of a theater that is usually packed full with people. You also usually interact directly with other actors on stage, and a lot of the location, the stage buildings are quite artificial. The way that theater is done and staged allows for things that just they just work with the imagination much more of the audience than in film. In film, you have so much more detail in the buildings and the staging and the props, in the locations themselves. And one major difference between theater and screen acting is also that in theater you have very long monologues and dialogues, and that is only rarely the case for film or TV. A major difference, and that is usually quite difficult for newbies in the screen acting area, especially when they are trained and experienced theater actors, but that is something you need to know so that you can help them and guide them much better, is that the proximity to the camera and the framing affects the acting. So you need to tell your actors what the framing is, and also how close the camera will come to them, because that can be confusing for actors at some point, especially the ones that are less experienced with camera work. In a wider shot, they can use so much more of their body, but when it's a close-up or a quite narrow close-up, if they move just like this, they're out of frame entirely, and that is something they need to know. That is actually a skill that needs to be trained. So if you are going for a lot of those very close-up shots, or even like super narrow, then this is something you should actually test out in the casting situation, if this person is able to maintain that and still be natural, because that is actually the really challenge in it, to keep that control over your body as an actor, but then at the same time you have to be totally natural in front of the camera. That's not easy, and not everybody can do that. Experience helps, but I would suggest for the casting process to just have a look at that. It doesn't mean that people who are mainly in theater or on stages can't do that, but you should, if there are two people and they're totally equal, then I would test it whether they can do it or not. I would not just assume, but I would test it with them if they can hold their position right in place as they should in front of the camera. Oftentimes on set, the other actor is not present, either because of scheduling or because of space. That is the main reason why the other person is often not present. So the actor has to be able to act as if the other person was there. They have to act as and react in the way as if the other person was talking to them. What helps them usually, if at least someone reads the lines of the other person. But I would always discuss that with the actors, because some are confused or get confused by something like that. So definitely stay in communication with your actors to figure out what is better for their performance. Then, of course, in film, the locations are more real, or there are real locations. But what makes it weird is the crew and all the equipment, the lights, the cables, and all these things that can be confusing and can be scary for actors as well. And it can have an impact on their imagination. It shouldn't, but it can. So it's usually a good idea to also, in the planning process, in the pre-production process, to think what is really necessary and what is not necessary on set. How many people are really necessary to be on set, and how many can do something else in the meanwhile, and also look for cables and all these things. And on film, less is more dialogue, so there's less speaking but more reacting. There's more happening between the lines. The actual action happens as they're moving or what you're showing, and that's how you really tell the story. So even though the lines are important, hopefully, because the screenplay was hopefully written in a way that every line was is there with some purpose, it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that they are always talking. There's quite a lot of silence, and theater actors sometimes struggle with that. So that's also something you need to take into consideration to encourage that kind of magic that actually happens when there is silence. The silence on screen is very, very powerful, and maybe some actors need a little bit of help with that. And that doesn't mean they're bad actors. It just means you have to communicate really well what you want from them, and then most of them will be happy to deliver and also capable to do that. What you can do as a director to become a better actor's director is to learn as much as you can about acting, and not just from books or from videos, but really experiencing it. So attend courses. There are so many methods that you can try out, and new methods are coming out. So just be open to that. There's Sanford Meisner, you might have heard the method, it's very famous. Konstantin Stanislavski, Michael Chekhov, Stella Adler, and so forth. There's so much that you can look into. Another thing I would really recommend to look into is improvisation. There are really good examples of filmmakers who even incorporated improvisation into their work when they made films. But it can also be a tool to solve problems that occur in the rehearsal process or even during filming. But it can also open doors to things nobody has thought about. And I will talk about that in a bit more depth later. Just look forward to it. And finally, that's also something you really should work on as a director in general, is on your social and team leading skills, because everything stands and falls with you. You are responsible for this film, and the relationship between you and your actors, but also with the crew, has a lot to do with how well you behave, how well you can read people, how well you can adjust to situations, and also how well you communicate. And communication, in my opinion, is the most important thing anyway, because it can solve so many issues that could just come up out of nowhere, and you can avoid so many misunderstandings. And also it really builds the trust into you and into your work when you're open. And even if that means that you sometimes say, I don't know yet, but let's try out, let's find a solution together. Or if it's not something that can be solved together, you can say, I will look into that and I will find a solution for that. And we will talk about that later. I think that is a quite strong way of communication, because it shows you're a human being. You don't know everything, but it's not an issue for yourself. You're still strong, and the ship is not sinking only because of that. That builds confidence in the whole project. So now let's look into, as I said before, I will talk about rehearsal, a bit more focusing on the rehearsal, because it's a very good example of how to work with actors efficiently. So as soon as you have the screenplay locked, it is time to start planning the rehearsal process. That means that you really read through this script, you make a breakdown, you study the screenplay really well. You have to understand each character and all their arcs very well. You're the only person who needs to know absolutely everything, and the second person on set who should also know everything as well as possible is the assistant director, but you must know absolutely everything about it. The rehearsal process for me, as I mentioned earlier, starts in and during the casting already, because that's when you start to experiment. I have attended castings as an actress where there was no rehearsal before the actual filming, because there was simply no time and no budget for that. And in the casting process, we tried things out, and then on set he said to me, remember what we did in the casting, do that. So that was basically the rehearsal. Ideally you can do a rehearsal before you film your film, because it will save you quite a lot of time on set, and it will help the actors that their characters set in a little bit more, and it will help them to be more natural on set usually. There's always an exception, but in general, that's the way. So if you can do a rehearsal, everybody will be thankful for that. Even the DOP, when they attend the rehearsal, they will know so much more about the whole process and what you want to achieve. And it will help also that communication. So there's a big, big plus point for rehearsals, and as you know, I'm quite passionate about that. So what are your planning goals, or what do you want to achieve with the planning for the rehearsals? It will give confidence in what you want to achieve yourself, but also all the other people involved in this project. Knowing how you can achieve that is also incredibly helpful, makes things efficient, your communication is more efficient, and that improves your communication of your vision. Time efficiency on set is a huge difference when you plan everything really well, when you plan the rehearsal really well, and it also really creates an atmosphere of stability and reliability and trust in you and your work. So what do you need to plan? First, how much time will you need to rehearse? What is the ideal amount of time, and what is the minimum of time? You don't need to rehearse absolutely everything into the last detail, because that would also have an effect on spontaneity on set. So you don't need to plan too much time, but try to be as realistic as possible about it. How many of the actors will you need to rehearse with? Most likely you will not need all the actors to rehearse with. The smaller parts, I mean, of course, it depends on what their role is, what their scenes are, but oftentimes you don't need to rehearse that. So think about which ones will need the rehearsal. Why? The why is really good, because actors might need to know the whys if they're skeptical about that, if they don't want to do a rehearsal. But that's something you should actually clarify in the casting process, because if they are absolutely against rehearsals and you want to do rehearsals, then you have a problem. So, just discuss that early enough. Then also, what is your goal? What do you want to achieve with the rehearsal? Where do you want to go? How experienced are your actors in front of the camera? That is really something you should evaluate beforehand, and that's something you can explore in the rehearsal process as well. But when you know that, this will also have an impact on how much time you plan for the rehearsal process. Then, of course, where will you do the rehearsals? Do you rent a room? Do you have a room? Can you rehearse outdoors somewhere, where maybe? And which methods do you think you want to use during the rehearsals? Some kind of specific method? Do you want to try out some improvisation? Is there a goal you have with improvisation as well, if you want to use it? And then what I do next, I really like structure. You might see that probably in in my slides. I like to structure things and I like pillars. So the way I structure rehearsals is in 3 pillars. First of all, I like to explore the characters together with the actors. And I will probably use one of the methods that I have picked out. I tend to be a bit more flexible because I've been doing this for quite a long time, but I think for a bit less experienced directors, it's a good idea to just choose certain methods you feel comfortable with to play around with. Then I really like to incorporate improvisation for different reasons. Sometimes it is to explore parts of the story that are not in the screenplay, but will help the actors to place something specific in a scene, to understand something specific about the character. And sometimes it's also to solve something that is probably not working that well in the script, but it is really too late to fix it now. That could be solved with improvisation, but also I think that has a lot to do with me being an actor. I like what actors bring to the table. They have oftentimes, when you invite them to that kind of work, they have such great ideas. You wouldn't come up alone or on the desk. And that's why I think it's incredibly beneficial to also incorporate improvisation into the rehearsal process. And finally, I work with them on the text. So now let's look into the details. When you arrive at the rehearsal room, everybody is arriving, let them arrive as well. Ideally, you send out an invitation for 15 minutes before the start. So that will help that everybody is on time when you actually want to start the rehearsal. That's at least something I have learned over time, that not everybody has the same sense of punctuality as I do. I mean, they should, professional actors should be punctual, but to save my own nerves, I like to give them 15 minutes early, and I am there 15 minutes early. They're not in front of closed doors or anything. But that will also help them to familiarize themselves with the room. They can go to the loo. They can change if they want to change into other clothes. A lot of actors like to do that because they have something more neutral, or even something that is already a reminder of the costume they might be wearing in this character, in these scenes. So you give them that kind of time to really arrive and leave their day-to-day life or whatever the day was for them outside. And the same is for you, of course. Then I like to just sit down with them, discuss the expectations of the day from both sides. So what I'm expecting, what they are expecting, what they're hoping for, what I'm hoping for. And I also always give room for some kind of a dialogue about their ideas, about their concerns. Maybe they have got stuck somewhere with the lines, they didn't really understand something, then I would definitely discuss those things with them. And what I would always like to do is to make sure that I can stick to the schedule. I think it's a bit frustrating when directors, I mean, always do overtime, but not like a little bit, but always at least 2-3 hours more than it was actually scheduled. I mean, everybody has a life and nobody is our slave on set. I think it also shows respect. Of course, things can happen, unforeseeable things can happen. It should just not happen all the time. So really try to stick to the schedule. I just closed the door because there is a dog, a neighbor's dog, who's really loud for some reason. And that's quite distracting. So I'll be back in a minute. Fresh air is nice. The dog is lovely, by the way. He's just a bit loud at the moment. Yeah, and then when we have discussed everything that was probably in the room, then I'll do a warm up together as a group. I like to start with for example, some Sanford Meisner exercises or something else, whatever my goal is on the day. And I will not go through these methods because there's simply no time today, but if you're interested in different techniques, I'm sure Raindance offers quite many different courses, but you can find introductions for that also online, whether it's through a searching machine or on YouTube, and then you can look into that first to figure out what you would like to try out for yourself. So first things first, exploring the characters in general. This is usually something I just sit down with the actors and have a chat about the characters. I ask a lot of questions. Sometimes instead of the sitting, I walk around with them. If this has something to do with, I try to understand how these people, the actors, work better. Some like to move a bit more. I'm definitely someone who is better at learning and understanding things when I can move. I walk a lot. When I learn lines myself, I never sit. It just doesn't happen. The lines will never stick if I don't move. So I will just try to find out what is better for them. I ask a lot of questions and I listen, and I'm open to what the actors have already prepared, their thoughts they have already made about this character, about the scenes. And what is incredible, an incredible preparation for what is to follow is to let them talk as the character, because through that they start to develop the voice, they start to develop patterns, how they speak, and also they start to think more as the characters. And to think as the characters will help them to be more natural as the character in front of the camera. And it will also help them to learn the lines quicker usually. Not for everybody, but for most people, this is incredibly helpful. Then I do some kind of improvisation. So I'm not working on the scenes yet. I'll first do some kind of improvisation, because that one of the goals is to give them the opportunity to explore the character a bit more physically. That is one of the main reasons why I do improvisation. For you, it's probably another reason. You find other reasons for yourself to use improvisation. Maybe you don't like improvisation at all. There is no right or wrong, in my opinion. I'm sharing my own experience with you and how I work and how it works for me. Improvisation, I find, helps actors to find the character quicker, because improvisation is a form of play. I sometimes say improvisation maybe at the beginning, and later I just say to the actors, go playing, play this or that. I give them some guidelines, I give them some kind of a framework, because there is a goal. I share that kind of goal to a certain extent, because sometimes it's not good to give them the goal, because some actors will just go for the goal, and the reality is very often that the journey is the actual goal. So think about what kind of information they need for that improvisation. But what you can always do is guiding them through the improvisation. You can talk to them while they're improvising. And what is very often helpful, I mentioned that before, or what you can learn from improvisation is what happens in between scenes. What led to this moment in the scene, really? What was the build up? It is not, usually it doesn't start just in the scene. There's something happening before that, and maybe it's not in the screenplay, so it's not explored in that way. And this will give them the chance to physically explore what was happening before that, and that will make the actual performance of the scene so much more powerful. Yeah, so I'm a huge advocate of improvisation, and maybe you will also like it. So yeah, here are some, this is the summary of what I already said. Also encourage them to ask questions. Encourage them to ask questions, sometimes even in the improvisation. with each other, because that keeps conversations going where necessary, but also encourage them not to speak again. See what's happening if they're not talking. I mean, if you have a lot of tension in a moment, in a scene, very often that is a result of this not speaking, of this just staring at each other, or not staring, looking away from each other. That could also be the solution. And these are the things you can find out in the improvisation. Maybe the screenwriter wrote something, but when you try it out, it's not really that powerful. And then you try maybe the opposite of that, something that feels entirely wrong, and suddenly it works. So, and finally, third step, that's where it's very fast that I jump here, because I'm picking up something from the improvisation, and I'm also using that in the work on the written text. Of course, the actors have to understand the scene and what it is about. Who is really involved in the scene. Sometimes there are people involved in that scene that are not in the scene. That has to be understood. They also need to understand every line, every word, why this character is really saying those things there at this point. What is the subtext? What is really going on underneath the lines? What is the purpose of this scene? Because that's also something you need to explore. The actors might need to know that, maybe not. That's your decision if you want to share that or not. But you need to know that, most definitely, because that will help you guide your actors towards what the thing that you want to achieve with that scene. I think it's also important to explore what happened just before that scene with the actors together, so that they know where they're coming from. And this could be a result of an improvisation. Then also, when does it happen in the story? What is the time? Is it night? Is it day? Is this person actually already tired or still tired? How is this person? If it's right in the morning, what kind of person is this person in the morning? Is it a bubbly person? Is it a morning zombie? And also, what will happen after the scene has ended? All these things you should explore as part of working on the written text. Oftentimes, actors are quite scared when they first have to play a scene. Not all actors are extroverts and jump into the challenge. Actually, most are scared. Stage fright is also for things like that. Also for the rehearsal itself, there is already some kind of stage fright, but you can help them. And I use different exercises, not all of them at once or just for the same thing. I try out different things for different scenes. One exercise that helps immensely well is doing it wrong. I encourage them to do it entirely wrong. Don't do it the way it's right, because nobody knows yet what right is, because it's still the rehearsal process. I just don't say that. But just allow them to be wrong. And most of the times that frees up the creativity. It starts to flow, and they will get it right in one or the other way, or you will find things that you can definitely use and build on as you go through the rehearsal. The second one is also fantastic, is turning it into a melodrama. So encourage them to totally overact, like not just a little bit. Like I don't know if you've ever seen Stage Beauty. That is a film about the first female actress on stage, because before that only men were allowed to play, to be actors. And there's a lot of overacting involved, and that's what you should encourage for that exercise. And then you can pare it down as they are like really enjoying it and really playing. And I emphasize playing quite a lot when it comes to acting, because acting is playing. Children are doing a lot of role plays, and they improvise quite a lot. I mean, all the time. Actually, they do role plays with each other when they play with their cars or their dolls. Everything is a role play, and they're immersed in that kind of moment. And that's what you want to get from your actors. That's what you want them to do. And that's why I like to say play. And this melodramatic acting has a lot to do with playing, and usually they will enjoy it. Not everybody will, not everybody will appreciate it. Some actors will find it very strange as well. Then it's probably better to choose another approach. But again, it's about trying and finding out who these people are and what they need from you. And that is part of the preparation. And one exercise I also like very much is repetition, that is coming from Sanford Meisner. I will share this video. It's really funny. At the end, we have only a few slides left before our Q&A part starts, but you can watch this little chunk in between. The repetition is that you take a sentence and you repeat it in all sorts of ways. You experiment with it, saying something really funny. You will watch it. I don't want to give it away because it's so great. And yeah, you have to wait just a few minutes. When working on the scene, as I said before, the actor must know exactly what the lines mean to the character in this particular moment, and they must have an awareness for the subtext that is going on. And that needs to be discussed sometimes, or you figure it out through improvisation, or you figure it out in just trying it out. The first tryouts might not be very good of doing it on the text. Sometimes it's great from the start, especially the really experienced actors can deliver a lot. But if you're working with less experienced actors, then don't expect too much from the very first tryout when they work with the text. But try to focus on what is good and what they can continue to use or what they can build on, because that will build first the confidence, but they will also have something to work with. And I'm a huge fan of saying everything positively and encouragingly, and not saying, oh, this was crap or something. I like to say what was good, and I give them something to improve the performance rather than say something negative. And I have been very, very lucky in my career as an actress. I have only very rarely encountered directors who do it in a very different way, and in the way you might have heard rumors about of directors. But in my case, I'm very lucky that I have encountered mostly directors who are incredibly encouraging and positive in the way they speak with people. Then also work with their interpretation, guide them if it is too far away from the story you want to tell. But let them do their thing first. Look at their offer. You have most likely quite a vision of what you want to see, but you have cast this actor for a reason. So take their offer first and then work with that and guide them towards where you want them to be. But most likely it's somewhere in between, between what they have to offer and somewhere what you have originally imagined. I like to encourage actors to use props and costumes. It really helps them to get into the physical acting much more. It makes a huge difference, for example, for a woman, if they are in flats, in no shoes, in trainers, or in high heels, because it changes so much in the body. Even the voice changes automatically, the whole behavior changes. A big skirt can change something. It also makes it different in a man if they wear a suit or just joggers. You know, I mean, I see that so often in people I know. If I meet them in private and then I suddenly see them in a suit, and I sometimes have the feeling that different people, because of course people play roles in their lives as well. So use that to your advantage, and the actors will usually love that anyway. Give them some exercises if they are stuck. So you look at your toolbox, what could probably help them. Maybe you want to go back to improvisation to get some flow back, and then also let them know how you're going to film the scene. So let them move within that space, within that scope. So let them know, okay, this will be a wide shot. This is the room that you can use. You can go from here to there, and they can practice that a little bit. Because again, for the less experienced actors, this is a great training field and will make things more effective on set. Give them markers as well. And the more experienced actors will know what to do with that and will also appreciate the opportunity to practice it a little bit, because to hit a mark is also a skill. And the skill is, for example, if you want to hit a specific mark, then you start from there and go back to the beginning point and count how many steps you took, and then you will hit the mark. But the thing is, you have to try it out so that you know that you can't just do it like this. And that's why an experienced actor will also appreciate that opportunity. And finally, when you're doing rehearsals in general, even if you're doing it on set, because you can do the rehearsals on set if there's no time, but you use the time when everything is set up, the light is set up and the camera is set up. You can use that time most of the time. Sometimes it's a bit tricky when there is not enough space to do that, but when you can do that. But don't over-rehearse. Don't rehearse everything. Leave some things to the unknown. Leave it to the spontaneity of the moment. This kind of, that it builds a little bit of tension. It builds a bit of fear, but fear is quite a strong word. The thing is, it's an energy you can see on screen if it's not totally rehearsed to death. However, I'm very, very, very strict about learning lines. I believe strongly that actors have to know their lines in their sleep. So I will communicate that beforehand to everybody. I want that. Because for what and the way I work with them, sometimes it needs to be so fast, what I'm expecting from them, or I say, now speed it up, do it slowly, do this, do that, and so forth. If they don't have the lines in their brains almost ingrained, then it will be very difficult for them. They will start to think about what they're saying rather than saying them. And we don't think that much about what we're saying. I mean, when I talk, I make breaks just to sort thoughts, but I'm not really thinking about what I'm saying, because otherwise I would be much slower when I'm talking. And that's what actors should be able to do when they play their roles. And the final 2 points, in my opinion, are probably one of, or the most important ones in general for directors, because you often hear the opposite. But in my opinion, it's incredibly important to be kind, to be polite, and to be respectful, and to be a role model for how you want them to behave. So be punctual, be reliable, be trustworthy, and so forth, because that will all contribute to the success of the filming in the end.